feels like satire. I mean, it feels like somebody sat down and wrote this out for like a TV show. It's hard to wrap my mind around the fact that this is somebody of his stature, his age, his experience in life. It's hard to believe that somebody who should know better came to the table with this.
She described dancing with you and you profusely sweating, and that she went on to have possibly...
There's a slight problem with the sweating, because I have a peculiar medical condition, which is that I don't sweat, or I didn't sweat at the time, and that was... Oh, actually, yes, I didn't sweat at the time, because I had suffered what I would describe as an overdose of adrenaline in the Falklands War when I was shot at.
Hello, how are you? Welcome to my channel. My name is Dear Denise. I hope you had a chance to see my video about the fact that Andrew has lost his titles, and that news came to us on Friday. As I said in that video, our readings today are spectacular because they are going to start talking about the beginning of the end. And when all this Jeffrey Epstein stuff really came bubbling to the surface for the entire globe, we're going to be talking about the interview that he did, which was so horrific and so bad. His answering was so bumbling. He looked like such a fool. He looked so inept and incapable, and I've never seen a guiltier person in my life. So we're going to be talking about that. And so with the news that has come out and with the readings that we have today, you are going to be the most well-versed person in the drama of Prince Andrew. Here we go. Let's get started. On July 6, 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was arrested on charges of sex trafficking. An offer of $100 million bail was refused, and he was sent to the Metropolitan Correction Center in Manhattan. A few days earlier, the papers in Virginia Giuffre's 2015 defamation case against Ghislaine Maxwell had been unsealed, revealing the allegation that Johanna Sjoberg's breast had been groped by Prince Andrew, and, with claims all denied, that Giuffre had been forced by Epstein to have sex with former New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson, billionaire Glenn Debin, and former Democratic Senate Majority Leader George Mitchell. On August 9th, a further 2,000 pages of documents were opened. The next day at 6:25 a.m., Epstein was found on his knees in his cell with a sheet tied around his neck on the top bunk. He was rushed to hospital, where he was pronounced dead at 7:36 a.m. His cellmate had been moved out the previous day, which was unusual for someone on suicide watch. The CCTV was not working, and both his guards had fallen asleep at exactly the same time and for the same 3 hours, meaning that 6 mandatory visual checks had not been made. He had been taken straight to New York Presbyterian Lower Manhattan Hospital, violating the protocol that any suicide should be treated as if it were a crime scene, and the body was not photographed as it was found. Epstein's death must have come as a relief to many important figures whose secrets he held. The next day, the Queen, in a show of solidarity, sat Andrew beside her as she was driven to church. Andrew left Balmoral early by private jet for a villa in Sotogrande, loaned him by a Spanish businessman, hoping that that would be the end of the matter. But it wasn't. On August 18th, the Mail on Sunday published a video made by Mazer Mohammed showing Andrew affectionately saying goodbye to a female visitor at the door of Epstein's New York mansion the day before he was pictured walking with the sex offender in Central Park in December 2010. 2 days later, it was revealed to be Catherine, the 29-year-old daughter of Paul Keating, Prime Minister of Australia from 1991 to 1996. Keating, who was at the time in a relationship with billionaire Las Vegas hotel owner Andre Balazs, a friend of Ghislaine Maxwell, said that she had just met Andrew for a cup of tea. In spite of being contacted by multiple news agencies numerous times since the video was made public, she has refused to comment further. The next day, the Daily Mail published an article triangulating Andrew's movements with Epstein's flight logs and Virginia Giuffre's claims. It supported her statements that the two of them had been in London in March 2001, and the following month in New York and the Caribbean. Buckingham Palace refused to answer any of the questions put to it by the paper, including whether Andrew had met Giuffre in April 2001. Bradley Edwards, Giuffre's lawyer, called on him to come forward as a material witness. Amid continuing media speculation, Andrew issued another statement. I met Mr. Epstein in 1999. During the time I knew him, I saw him infrequently and probably no more than once or twice a year. I've stayed in a number of his residences. At no stage during the limited time I spent with him did I see, witness, or suspect any behavior of the sort that subsequently led to his arrest and conviction. Okay, but just as a side note, it's like, okay, well, maybe you didn't see it, although we all know you did. But like, okay, so that's what you say. But did you not know that he had been arrested for soliciting a minor for prostitution? Like, Surely you'd heard about that, you know? What I'm supposed to believe that, you know, you just had no idea and you just kind of sometimes stayed in his house. But what about when your friend goes to prison or jail, as it was? You just kind of missed out on that part of the story? I mean, what are you talking about? Well, the Buckingham Palace statement continued. The Duke of York has been appalled by the recent reports of Jeffrey Epstein's alleged crimes. His Royal Highness deplores the exploitation of any human being, and the suggestion he would condone, participate in, or engage any such behavior is abhorrent. But see, you know you've gone wrong when anybody has to make a statement in your defense, such as, they deplore any exploitation of a human being, because that should just go without saying. If I am in a situation where those around me have to come out to my defense and say such a thing, I'm guilty of sin. Because what in the world has occurred that that sort of statement would be necessary on my part? The same day, the Mail detailed how Epstein and the prince had partied together at least 20 times, even after the financier was convicted, in New York, Palm Beach, Little St. James, Thailand, Buckingham Palace, Balmoral, Sandringham, and Windsor Castle. The journalist Elizabeth Day, then a feature writer on the Sunday newspaper, recalled being approached by a member of Andrew's staff keen to rebrand him after he had been nicknamed Air Miles Andy while he was still trade envoy. Waiting to see the Duke for the interview, she had noticed the oversized teddy bear stuffed into a seat outside his office and asked the prince about it. In response, he sniggered and told her that it had been a wedding present from his ex-wife, which he still found very funny. It seemed rather strange to me that a grown man should be so amused by the presence of a stuffed toy, said Day. But I suppose the English upper class have a long history with teddy bears used as transitional objects to express emotions they might feel uncomfortable with. Finding him defensive and somewhat sulky, Day asked if he could imagine life if he had not been born into the royal family. How on earth would I know? The Duke responded, as if he had been asked something absurd. Looking back, in the light of Virginia Gouffre's claims, Day concluded that it was totally beyond him to understand what life might be like for someone else, for someone less privileged, less fortunate, more vulnerable. I can imagine him, this man with his teddy bear and his arrested development, being as self-centered as a child and not giving any thought as to the impact his behavior might have on someone else. I can imagine him, too, being baffled and semi-outraged that he was now being asked to account for his actions. Friends of the Duke now briefed the media that the picture with Virginia Gouffre didn't look right, claiming their heights did not match and his fingers were chubbier. In her court depositions, Gouffre had stated that the two of them had taken a bath together. Andrew's defenders later claimed that the bath was too small for them to have shared easily. But the story refused to die. On August 24th, it was reported that Andrew would be summoned to Paris as a witness to help French prosecutors investigating allegations of rape and sexual abuse by Epstein. On August 27th, Virginia Gouffre held a press conference. Asked about Prince Andrew, she answered, "He knows exactly what he's done, and I hope he comes clean about it." She repeated her claims the following month in an interview with NBC News. At the end of August, Fox News ran a video of a 2005 police raid on Epstein's Palm Beach home, showing massage tables and pictures of naked young women. Gouffre, with 4 other alleged Epstein victims, including a British former model who had been at school with Kate Middleton, appeared on television and repeated her claims that she had once had sex with the prince in a bathroom. He had licked her toes and feet, and that he had said thank you afterwards. In September, the Sunday Times reported that British intelligence chiefs were concerned that Russia may have obtained blackmail, compromising material, on Prince Andrew over the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. According to the paper, John Mark Dugan, a former deputy in the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, had fled to Russia with copies of files on Andrew and was in touch with Pavel Borodin, a senior Russian official and mentor of Vladimir Putin. Asked what might be in the files, Dugan claimed, "Lots of videos, but I wasn't going to sit around and watch them. Also lots of scanned documents. Law enforcement has had it for many years. They had it when Epstein was first arrested in 2006, and the FBI had it when they seized my computers in 2016. And I know they had these materials because they were the ones that alerted MI6 in 2019 that I had a duplicate and had a compromising video of Andrew. So far as the future goes, it's in their court. We're not law enforcement, so we have no power in this matter." A well-respected PR expert, Jason Stein, he'd previously worked as a special advisor to Amber Rudd as Work and Pensions Minister and later was special advisor to Liz Truss as Prime Minister, was brought in to handle Andrew's communication strategy, and several official engagements were canceled, including any events in the United States. An indication of Andrew's state of mind came with a newspaper story at the beginning of September of an altercation, some reporters said physical as well as verbal, with the respected master of the household, Vice Admiral Sir Anthony Johnstone Burt, and a former Navy pilot contemporary of Andrew's, over a booking for a Pitch at Palace event. Criticisms had continued of the Duke's Pitch at Palace activities. In May 2019, he had taken a private jet to Canada for a pitch event, though numerous commercial flights were available. Buckingham Palace claimed the cost had been met privately, but would not say by whom. Another trip, on which Andrew was accompanied by his ex-wife, daughter Beatrice, and her then-boyfriend, to Bahrain as guests of the Crown Prince, was timed to coincide with the Grand Prix. Rich Wilson, the founder of various digital companies, wrote an article arguing Pitch at Palace appears to have been a vehicle for Prince Andrew to enrich himself at the cost of the hard-working entrepreneurs he claimed to be helping. Wilson divulged that he had been invited to a pitch event, but on the condition he fill in an application. Reading the small print, he saw that Pitch at Palace was asking for a 2% commission if you raised investment at any point for up to 3 years after the pitch event. He was shocked. It's a massive red card. There is literally no reason to pay to pitch to investors. It's simply predatory on the part of the organizers, and anyone operating in this way should be named and shamed for it. This money was to be funneled from the charity Pitch at Palace CIC, which had sponsored and benefited from events at Buckingham Palace and St. James Palace, graced by the Queen and various military bands, and to Andrew's private limited company, Pitch at Palace Global Limited. The second company, of which the Prince was the ultimate controlling party, had 8 directors. It had £300,000 in the bank and was entitled to pay dividends to its shareholders. It was also registered at Buckingham Palace, which, according to royal protocol, must never be used for commercial purposes. It appeared that, for the Prince, business as well as charity began at home. For the year ending March 31st, 2019, Pitch at Palace Global posted a profit of £576,000, with an increase in assets from £943,731 in 2018 to £3,125,398, indicating turnover, amounts received in sponsorship or donation income, for the business exceeding £2.2 million. Accounts up to March 2020 showed assets of £1,495,737 and profits of £1.2 million. But that posed a question. Where had the profits come from? Indeed. Well, probably because he's over there taking 2% off of all these poor little investors who came thinking he was just trying to give them a leg up. Hardly. Okay, now let's get into the stuff we really want to know, because this is a section called The Prince and the Pedophile, and this is really where Andrew's going to find himself in some hot, hot water. That October, Channel 4 aired a documentary, The Prince and the Pedophile, which revealed that Jeffrey Epstein had 16 phone numbers for Prince Andrew in his infamous address book, including a line to the Duke's computer modem, and 18 for his ex-wife. At the end of the month, Dr. Michael Baden, a former New York City medical examiner who, during a 5-decade medical career, had worked on high-profile cases, including those of O.J. Simpson, President John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and record producer Phil Spector, gave an interview on American television. He had been hired by Jeffrey Epstein's brother to conduct an autopsy after the family were not given a copy of the official report, though required to by law. Baden noted that the 66-year-old Epstein had 2 fractures on the left and right sides of his larynx, specifically the thyroid cartilage, or Adam's apple, as well as 1 fracture on the left hyoid bone, above the Adam's apple. Those 3 fractures are extremely unusual in suicidal hangings, and could occur much more commonly in homicidal strangulation, he concluded. There were also hemorrhages in Epstein's eyes that were common in homicidal strangulation and uncommon, though not unheard of, in suicidal hangings. Spencer Cooven, who represented many of the victims, also had doubts about the suicide verdict. I can't tell you he definitely didn't commit suicide, but it looks suspicious. He believed he was going to get out of jail because what he did, in his mind, was perfectly legal, perfectly fine. So why would he kill himself if he didn't feel he'd done anything wrong, especially before he's convicted? On the beginning of November, an insider at ABC News leaked a hot mic interview with Amy Robach, Good Morning America's co-host and breaking news anchor at ABC, recorded 3 months earlier. The segment, passed to the investigative website Project Veritas, showed Robach venting her frustration to the off-camera producer about an interview she and a colleague, Jim Hill, had conducted with Virginia Giuffre in 2015, which was then squashed by the network.
First of all, I was told, who's Jeffrey Epstein? No one knows who that is. This is a stupid story. Then the palace found out that we had her whole allegations about Prince Andrew and threatened us a million different ways. She had pictures, she had everything. She was in hiding for 12 years. We convinced her to come out. We convinced her to talk to us. It was unbelievable what we had. Clinton, we had everything. I tried for 3 years to get it on, to no avail, and now it's all coming out, and it's like these new revelations, and I freaking had all of it. I'm so pissed right now. Like,
one pressure point was to deny the channel any future interviews with the present Prince and Princess of Wales. As a result of the story being suppressed, Epstein and his associates had been able to groom, traffic, and abuse young girls for another 3 years. Robach went on to state that she believed Epstein had been killed in prison. So do I think he was killed? 100% yes, I do. He made his whole living blackmailing people. Yep, there was a lot of men in those planes. A lot of men who visited that island. A lot of powerful men who came into that apartment. Well, thanks, Amy Robach, for letting us know what was really going on. But don't you think it's sickening? I mean, we've all had this conversation already about this because when it happened and everybody saw that clip, it was just sickening that the news network could have such an explosive story and then be like, yeah, but we really want to be able to still talk to Prince William and Princess Catherine. It's so crazy to me that someone would trade on a story like Epstein because they don't want to lose their coverage of the Prince and Princess of Wales. That's insane to me. Utterly insane. We all love them. We like them a lot. But we're here in America. What difference is it to us what they're up to? We like to see them. They're lovely people. But this is an explosive story. Imagine the views this network could have gotten if they just had run the story like they should have done. Oh, but we want to be able to see what Catherine's wearing. I did not realize that William and Catherine were such big money makers over here in America. That we'd be willing to drop a story like Epstein in favor of getting a little bit of coverage on William and Catherine. That does not make any sense. All right. Okay. Now we're on to the next section in the book entitled The Fight Back. Okay. We call it The Fight Back. But this is also where Andrew's going to decide that he needs to give an interview, because he's got so many things to say. He can defend himself just so well. This chapter is entitled That Went Pretty Well. Prince Andrew's office had been lobbied by news organizations to give an interview explaining the Virginia Giuffre case ever since the scandal broke, few more determinedly than the respected BBC's Newsnight. In May 2019, 6 months after first being approached, Amanda Thirsk opened up negotiations with Newsnight's planning team, suggesting Andrew could talk about trade after Brexit, his projects, and Britain's place in the world. His friendship with Epstein would be off limits, but after a long courtship, Thirsk finally agreed to a full-length interview. Sam McAllister, the Newsnight producer who handled the negotiations, remembered talks on November 11th when Andrew seemed open, confident, energetic, boisterous, and thick-skinned. He was accompanied by his daughter Beatrice, who busily took notes during the 2-hour meeting. Both Donald McCabe, the Queen's communications secretary, and Jason Stein, the Duke's press advisor, were against an interview. Stein recommended a newspaper interview, while Thirsk and the rest of Andrew's family thought that it would be an opportunity to clear the air. They agreed to an hour-long face-to-face sit-down with Emily Maitlis. Going against the first rule of PR, no parameters were set about what would be raised. Maitlis and her team drew up questions, and she role-played answers with her editor, Esme Wren. It appears Prince Andrew did not do the same. On the day of the interview, November 14th, Maitlis and her team were allowed to film in the Blue Drawing Room at Buckingham Palace, for which Andrew had supposedly obtained permission from the Queen on the basis that it was a discussion about his official duties and his success with Pitchett Palace. Prince Charles and Camilla were on a 6-day tour of New Zealand and Sarah was in China, but the Queen watched it alone in her private sitting room at Windsor. Maitlis later remembered the Duke making small talk before the camera rolled. He seems at ease, fascinated by the mechanics of the whole process, laughing at the number of cameras Keith and Jonathan have set up. He does not seem particularly nervous. He doesn't seem like a man who's about to decide his own fate in an on-camera interview. The interview started, and Maitlis gave the Duke the opportunity to tell 1.7 million live viewers why he was there. Without preamble or anything about his trade envoy work, Andrew went straight to the subject of Jeffrey Epstein. He said he was delighted to be able to see you today and explained that the relationship with Epstein was not about partying. I never really partied. But because Epstein, the well-connected global financier, could provide useful connections, and he could learn from him. Andrew said he had visited Epstein on December 2010 in order to tell him that because he had been convicted, it was inappropriate for us to be seen together. When pressed about Virginia Giuffre, Andrew claimed to have no recollection of ever meeting this lady, none whatsoever, nor of that photograph ever having been taken. He added, "As a member of the royal family, I'm not one to, as it were, a hug and public displays of affection are not something that I do." Oh, well, what do I do with this picture? Or this one? Or this one? He'd never been to tramp with her, and he denied sweating profusely, explaining his peculiar medical condition caused by what I would describe as an overdose of adrenaline in the Falklands War when I was shot at, and I simply, it's almost impossible for me to sweat. He could not have been at tramp because he had taken Beatrice to a Pizza Express in Woking for a party at about 4 or 5, which he had remembered because going to Woking was a very unusual thing for me to do.
I was at home. I was with the children. I'd taken Beatrice to a Pizza Express in Woking for a party at, I suppose, sort of 4 or 5 in the afternoon.
Why would you remember that so specifically? Why would you remember a Pizza Express birthday and being at home?
Because going to Pizza Express in Woking is an unusual thing for me to do. A very unusual thing for me to do. I've only been to Woking a couple of times, and I remember it weirdly distinctly.
Mateless asked if he went on to have sex with Virginia Giuffre. "I can absolutely, categorically tell you that it never happened," Andrew responded. There's the buzzword, isn't it? So weird how often they use that word whenever he's trying to deny something. Asked if he regretted his friendship with Epstein, he replied, "Now, still not, and the reason being is that the people that I met and the opportunities that I was given to learn either by him or because of him were actually very useful." I mean, can you think of a worse answer? Just say you regret it. Just say it. Now, well, he had a lot of really useful friends for me. So, no, he helped me use people. And what else am I supposed to do with my time? Do I regret the fact that he was quite obviously conducting himself in a manner unbecoming? Yes, Andrew said. Unbecoming, Malus responded. He's a sex offender. You stayed with him, she said. Well, I stayed with him, and that's the bit that as it were, I kick myself for on a daily basis because it was not something that was becoming as a member of the royal family, and we try and uphold the highest standards and practices, and I let the side down, simple as that. The hour-long interview was soon over. Mateless had continually probed him about his relationship with Maxwell, Epstein, and Giuffre. He had rejected every allegation made against him, but admitted they had been a constant sore in the family. Asked if he had anything to add, he replied, "No, I don't think so. I think you've probably dragged out most of what's required, and I'm truly grateful for the opportunity that you've given me to be able to discuss this with you." Afterwards, McAllister asked the Duke's equerry how she thought it had gone. She beamed back at me. "Wasn't he wonderful?" Can you imagine thinking that was wonderful? I mean, talk about delusional. Mateless was given a tour of the palace, including the room in which the Queen had her weekly audiences with her prime ministers. The Duke also seemed pleased, later telling his mother, "I reckon that went pretty well, don't you?" Don't we have different worlds we live in? How could he have thought that went well, and how could anybody on his side have said, "Well done, sir. You really stood up for yourself in that interview"? I mean, all he did was shoot himself in the foot repeatedly. Okay, now that's the public understanding of how that interview came about, but actually it's quite gritty behind the scenes on how Newsnight got that interview, because actually it wasn't supposed to go to them at all. The book says that what we just read is the public story, and several journalists enhanced their careers as a result of that version with books and dramas. The reality is rather different. The BBC had long been investigating Prince Andrew's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, not in London but in Northern Ireland, and the key figure was not Emily Maitlis or Sam McAllister, but a BBC producer called Laura Burns. Working for the Northern Ireland Panorama office, Burns and assistant producer Olivia Davies had traveled widely in the United States, checking police reports, interviewing Epstein staff, tracing victims of both him and Prince Andrew, and persuading Virginia Giuffre and her legal team to be interviewed on camera. In Burns' words, the team also found personal email discussions between Ghislaine and Andrew discussing Virginia. The emails between Ghislaine and Andrew didn't exclaim, "It's fake. I've never met her," or any other questions. Instead, they worked together to build a dossier about Virginia to leak to the media. The investigations were not without problems. The women were followed by private investigators and had the police called on them, and they were warned that just because the palace has never sued the BBC before, we shouldn't assume that they wouldn't sue now. On August 26, 2019, the Panorama team approached Buckingham Palace seeking an hour-long interview with Prince Andrew to respond to the public allegations and their investigations. As Burns puts it, I knew if he gave an interview, he would hang himself and it would be TV gold. And I knew he lived in a world that was entirely not real. On September 9th, two members of The Office, presenters Dara McIntyre and his boss, Andrew Head, had a meeting at the palace to discuss the request, during which Andrew's team said that they had evidence that the photo of Andrew and Virginia was a fake. But they did not offer any evidence of this at the meeting. This was followed by a telephone call on November 8th, in which Head explained to the palace that their investigation would continue, and a right of reply letter would be sent to Andrew the following week. 4 days later, Burns learned that Andrew was not doing an interview with them, but with Newsnight, and that her months of research had to be passed on to the Newsnight team. How the interview moved from Panorama to Newsnight is debatable, but the suspicion remains that the palace preferred a straight interview to a right of reply after a hard-hitting investigation. Contrary to the narrative that had been presented, Newsnight, which had only previously discussed an interview to promote Pitch at Palace, had just 72 hours' notice of what would prove a seminal television event. It was Burns who was required to prepare them. She fact-checked their video insert, shared Panorama's script, researched contacts, legal documents, and detailed timelines, fact-checked their questions, and wrote some of the most significant questions of her own. Some of them included pinning Andrew down on whether he would assist the various international investigations into Epstein, and when he last saw Ghislaine Maxwell. Burns knew that an arrest on Ghislaine was imminent, and Prince Andrew was not just someone who was naively friends with one sex offender. He was good friends with two of the most prolific sex traffickers in the world. Burns also checked the veracity of the photograph of him with Virginia Giuffre and shared all of that information freely with the Newsnight team. It was a positive story of a collaboration with historically rival departments, Panorama and Newsnight, working together to hold power to account and get the prince's answers on record. Unfortunately, that was where the collaboration ended. Burns' credit was removed from the interview broadcast, and there was no mention of a crucial role in the BAFTA submission, in the press, or in any of the subsequent books or films. The single mother who had made the interview coup possible had been written out of the script. The Newsnight program, Prince Andrew and the Epstein Scandal, was shown on the BBC on November 16th. The press reaction was instantaneous and unanimous. The Washington Post called it a car crash, while the New York Times responded that experts on the royal family have described the interview as the biggest public relations debacle for the British royal family since the turbulent aftermath of the death of Princess Diana in a car crash in 1997. "I expected a train wreck," tweeted Charlie Proctor, editor of the Royal Centre website. "That was a plane crashing into an oil tanker causing a tsunami, triggering a nuclear explosion level bad." Andrew's statements were analyzed and found to be wanting. He claimed to have had no recollection of meeting Giuffre and provided an alibi for a date in question. No one had a recollection of a birthday party in Woking, including his own daughter. A diary entry showed that afternoon he had booked a manicure with a woman named Jean. He claimed now not to know where the bar was at Tramp, though it was by the dance floor and he had been photographed there days after he allegedly took Giuffre. A police protection officer remembered him returning to Buckingham Palace that night, but an attempt to check revealed the security logs were first covered by national security and then had been destroyed. The housekeepers at Sunninghill that weekend could not remember the prince's movements. Experts said that there was no known medical condition that made humans unable to sweat, and pictures were procured from 2001 showing Andrew perspiring. After he said the picture with Giuffre had been doctored because he always wore a suit and tie in London, pictures were produced of him photographed at events in casual clothes. There was skepticism about why it took 4 nights, with a dinner party thrown in his honor, to sever the relationship with Epstein, and, in a city bristling with hotels and with the British consulate nearby, that the excuse that it was a convenient place to stay really washed. He claimed he had severed contact with Epstein in 2010, but emails later showed the two were in touch in 2011. He denied he'd ever met Virginia Roberts, when there was plenty of evidence linking them, including a verified photograph. His claims not to party or be tactile was exposed with dozens of pictures in the press of him hugging and kissing various women at parties. But Giuffre's statements were also questioned. An investigation by the Daily Mail in December 2020 found that the bath at Maxwell's house, which Giuffre described as freestanding in the middle of the room, was a standard size, 5 foot 6 inches by 2 feet 4 inches, and it was an alcove bath, boxed in on 2 sides by the walls and on a third by the back of an airing cupboard. In her depositions and memoir, The Billionaire Playboys Club, Giuffre claimed she and Andrew had an alcoholic cocktail at Tramp, though it's well known that he does not drink, although a footnote says that in fact there are repeated accounts of his occasionally drinking alcohol. But Gouffre also recalled moving his hands across the curves of my body, not to shy away from the fact that he was in public. He was whispering sweet nothings into my ear and kissing my neck. I would just giggle, not really knowing how to reply to an aging man with a bad smile and terrible moves. For the article, 3 of his former equerries were interviewed, with one of them stating, "The idea of him dancing like that with all eyes on him is unimaginable." There were always paparazzi outside the club, but none of the dozen picture agencies that covered Tramp had any record of him entering or leaving. That said, few pictures have emerged of him dancing at China White, where he was a regular. The interview, rather than killing this story, inflamed it. Alicia Stone, who worked at Tramp for 6 months, remembered Andrew dancing all night with a girl who looked like she could be his daughter. They were practically going at it on the dance floor. All this while he was grabbing her tight and pouring his sweat all over her. He was dripping from dancing so much. Another Tramp employee, Andrew Wall, heard colleagues talking about Prince Andrew groping some waif-like teenage girl. It sounded like they were practically having sex on the dance floor. One of my colleagues told me at one point he saw Andrew biting the poor girl's neck and pulling her hair while they danced together very close. A London woman, Shukri Walker, came forward and told the Sun newspaper that she remembered the prince with a young girl. She was supported by a second witness, represented by the lawyer Lisa Bloom, who recalled that Prince Andrew was smiling and seemed to be very happy and Virginia was not. Bloom offered the witnesses to the FBI, who said they were not interested. Pressure was put on Scotland Yard to explain its decision not to investigate a complaint from Gouffre in July 2015 that she had been trafficked to the United Kingdom in 2021 to have sex with the Duke in London. The force claimed that they were not the appropriate authority to investigate because it would be largely focused on activities and relationships outside the UK. Sigrid McCall, who represented Gouffre and other survivors, knew the Newsnight interview had been a red rag to a bull. To have to sit there in front of the television and have Prince Andrew not take responsibility and go on national TV and say, "She's wrong, I don't even remember her," that's very offensive to a victim of sexual trafficking. Virginia Gouffre gave an hour-long interview to Panorama, which was broadcast in December. "I'm calling BS on this because that's what it is," she said. "He knows what happened. I know what happened. And there's only one of us telling the truth. And I know that's me." She now began the legal process, which would ultimately destroy the prince's career and reputation. My people! I wish we could go on, but I must go. Every time I rewatch that interview, I'm shocked again. It never stops being shocking to me. It doesn't stop being explosive in my mind. Every time I watch it, I catch something new or I hear it a different way. And especially with everything that we now know from having read Entitled together, his answers are even worse than I understood them to be when I originally saw that interview. I can't play large parts of it because then I get a copyright strike, but I implore you, go back and watch that interview in its full context. It feels like satire. I mean, it feels like somebody sat down and wrote this out for like a TV show. It's hard to wrap my mind around the fact that this is somebody of his stature, his age, his experience in life. It's hard to believe that somebody who should know better came to the table with this. It's so insane. We will meet again tomorrow. I really am trying to finish this book this week, so we should be finished with this book on Thursday. But it does mean that our episodes are going to run a little bit longer. Today, not so much because I had made that previous video discussing Andrew's situation and how he's getting his titles taken away. But from now on, we're going to be running at least an hour, maybe a little bit over. I know those are long episodes, but I do want us to be able to finish this book this week. All right, I will see you guys soon. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. Comment below of that interview that you guys remember. What for you was the weirdest thing he said? Wild times we're living in. All right, I'll see you guys soon. Thanks again. Bye.